In the tech backrooms of Austin, a young programmer decided to turn his broken heart into code. After 3 breakups, one with his own partner, Liam created a revolutionary app that promised to predict love with 98% accuracy. It was an immediate success, with the entire world connecting through an algorithm. But what he didn't expect was that his greatest match would emerge with the woman who hated the concept the most, a skeptical neuroscientist known for calling love a painkiller. With glitter, what was science became a romantic comedy. And amidst the chaos of data, dopamine, and existential debates, Liam and Harper discovered what no code could calculate: the most human bug of all, unpredictable love. This is the story of Loverithm, the app that promised to decipher love and ended up hacking its own creators. On the outskirts of Austin, Texas, among glass buildings and cafes with names in binary code, a young programmer named Liam typed lines of code like he was writing love letters to the future. After 3 consecutive breakups, one of them with his own partner, Liam decided to turn his discontent into innovation. With his head full of ideas and his heart still healing, he created the most ambitious project of his career, an algorithm capable of predicting with 98% accuracy the chance of 2 people falling in love. By his side, Chloe, his ex-girlfriend and current partner, brought data, strategy, and resilience to what would become Loverithm, a dating app so advanced it made Tinder look like a guessing game. What began as a nerdy experiment with a touch of romantic revenge became a global phenomenon within days. People from all over connected, matched, and even proposed marriage based on calculations and neural compatibility maps. But like any good romantic comedy with a scientific twist, the story was about to make the algorithm trip over its own circuits. It turns out that Liam, curious and with a touch of sarcasm, decided to test the system with his own profile. But the results didn't turn out as he'd hoped. The app identified as his ideal match a woman he'd previously argued with heatedly at a neuroscience symposium. Harper, a brilliant and stubbornly skeptical researcher known for publicly declaring that love was nothing more than a temporary biochemical cocktail, like painkillers with emotional glitter. Chloe, upon seeing the result, laughed for 5 minutes and suggested, "Maybe the app's right?" William, driven by a mix of defiance, scientific curiosity, and a hint of pent-up desire, accepted the invitation for a first date, and then began a sequence of tragicomic scenes, discussions about dopamine during dinner, debates about free will in the movie theater line, and to their surprise, a strange emotional connection that neither could explain with graphs. It was in this chaos between affection and algorithm that the adventure took shape. Harper, who initially agreed to participate in the game only to prove the app was a neurochemical hoax, soon found herself challenged by the experiences. She didn't like Liam, of that she was certain. But for some reason her emotional intelligence insisted on ignoring. Her body reacted differently around him. Her heart raced, her pupils dilated, and she hated knowing that all of this could be tracked by sensors. Liam, however, behind his skeptical, geek pose, began to experience something the code hadn't anticipated: empathy. For the first time in a long time, he paid attention to what the other person was feeling, not because the data indicated it, but because he genuinely cared. The two began to discuss love like someone playing chess with their own traumas. Each conversation was a checkmate on the other's insecurity. And on this unlikely board, they were about to discover that the system's true flaw might be exactly what the app couldn't foresee: the chaotic beauty of humanity. During an afternoon of testing in Loverithm's makeshift lab, Chloe had an idea that blended science, entertainment, and light provocation: to have Harper volunteer for a brain scanning study during romantic interactions. She knew that Harper, with her sharp sarcasm and chronic disbelief in love, would react with skepticism. But like any good scientist, Harper relished the chance to prove herself right. So she agreed. The proposal was simple. Pair couples formed through the app, monitor their brains with electrodes, heart rate sensors, and pupil dilation, and observe what actually happened during moments of connection, including the kiss. What the data revealed was striking. The brains activated during the first passionate kiss showed patterns similar to those of users high on cocaine. Dopamine spikes, serotonin levels drop, and intense oxytocin release. Neuroscience would call this a limerent phase. Chloe called it explosive chemistry. Harper? She called it temporary intoxication with emotional side effects. Meanwhile, parallel stories were taking hold within Loverithm. A couple formed through the app, Aina and Ben, experienced absurd spikes in dopamine every time they fought. They constantly argued, blocking and unblocking each other, but scans showed their brains were in a state of euphoria whenever they were in conflict. Chloe used the case as a study in dysfunctional behavior. Harper, laughing, said, "That's not love. It's chemical withdrawal with a relapse effect." The situation sparked hilarious and profound debates among the three, who began to question, could what we call love just be the brain addicted to its own neurotransmitters? Harper even suggested that, for many, the ideal relationship wouldn't be someone stable and reliable, but rather someone who activates the limbic system with the same intensity as a psychological thriller. Liam, always torn between logic and emotion, began to think that perhaps science was right. But his heart kept creating exceptions called Harper. Amidst measurements, graphs, and analyses came the most symbolic moment, the first kiss between Liam and Harper. Neither of them had planned it. It happened in the middle of a conversation about Charles Darwin, neuroplasticity, and the role of the hypothalamus in desire. Yes, seriously. A stray sentence, a nervous laugh, an awkward silence. And then, it happened. The kiss wasn't perfect. It was a bit lopsided, rushed, and awkward. But the sensors, still active from the experiment, went off. The monitor beeped loudly. Harper opened her eyes first, glanced at the numbers on the screen, and whispered, "Definitely cocaine," Liam laughed. For the first time, they weren't discussing data, they were living. From that moment on, something changed. They still disagreed on almost everything, but now they had a common ground, the desire to understand love, even if it was a glitch in the limbic system. And most curiously, the graph showed spikes in activity, even when they were silent. This raised a new question for the team. What if what truly connects two people isn't what they say, but what the body feels before the mind understands? Behind the scenes at Loverithm, the success was overwhelming. The app had gained millions of users, was featured on every tech portal, and influencers were vying to show off their matches in real time. It seemed like love had finally been cracked. But like any brilliant and ambitious creation, the system soon revealed its more unpredictable side. Strange stories began to emerge. A priest who had matched with a dominatrix famous for viral TikTok videos. A vegan nutritionist with a butcher who sold artisanal bacon. A former monk with a former reality show contestant. At first, Chloe thought it was human error. But as the cases increased and became memes, montages, and reaction videos, the team realized the bug was real. The algorithm had learned, based on interaction history, that emotional intensity was a sign of compatibility. In other words, the system had mistaken conflict for connection. And this called into question the entire foundation of the project. Harper was the first to raise the hypothesis. Maybe the app is rigged in its own reward circuitry, as if it believes that fighting, tension, and drama are indicators of passion. Chloe, more pragmatic, said, "People want intensity, even if it means instability." Liam, on the other hand, was beginning to experience a crisis. He created Loverithm to help people find each other, not to fuel toxic patterns disguised as love. The team was torn between the need to fix the bug and the philosophical dilemma. Does love really need to be chaotic to feel genuine? And what's more, could it be that, subconsciously, Liam himself was falling for Harper precisely because of their constant disagreements? As he reviewed his exchanges with Harper, he realized that the most intense moments weren't the affectionate ones, but the confrontations, the provocations, the debates, the silences filled with meaning. Was this the pattern the algorithm had detected? Was he, a skeptical programmer, hostage to the very chemistry he claimed to control? Social media, meanwhile, exploded. Chaotic matches became a global trend. Hashtags like #love_or_error and #lover_it_fails trended. Unlikely couples made videos dancing together, even though they couldn't stand each other. Harper recorded an interview saying the mistake was proof that love couldn't be reduced to data, and it became a meme with the phrase, "Want intensity? Fight the algorithm." But behind the laughter, something deeper was unfolding. The team began reviewing the system's parameters and discovered that, unconsciously, Liam himself had adjusted the formula to prioritize connections that caused emotional peaks. It was his way of unconsciously recreating what he felt with Harper. And that's when he understood, maybe love wasn't found in numbers, but in what they couldn't measure. In the discomfort, the curiosity, the contradiction. In the emotional intelligence to keep going, even without guarantees. And although the system was publicly crumbling, with the infatuation bug dominating headlines and Loverithm being touted as a love chaos startup, internal tension reached a new level. Amidst the confusion, Chloe, who still harbored feelings for Liam, albeit hidden beneath layers of rationality and functional sarcasm, decided to take action. She created a simulation within the app itself to induce jealousy in Liam, a fake international match with Matteo, an Italian model and entrepreneur with broken English, magnetic eyes, and self-help. Quotes that easily went viral. "Life is like wine, it should be felt, not measured," his profile read. The plan worked better or worse than Chloe expected. Liam, upon seeing Chloe's profile with Matteo on the company's feed, went into a silent emotional spiral. He said nothing, but he lost sleep, forgot meetings, and began to doubt his own logic. Harper, sensing the strange atmosphere and already tired of the conflicts, decided to step away from the project indefinitely. And that's when science began to do its invisible work. Liam began to experience clear physical symptoms: lack of appetite, insomnia, irritability, poor concentration. A team intern, seeing him staring at a spreadsheet for 4 hours without typing anything, asked with brutal innocence, "Are you heartbroken?" It was like a light bulb going on. Harper, even away, had saved a series of studies in the company system. Among them was an article that explained how rejection and longing activate the same brain areas as physical pain, especially the somatosensory cortex and the anterior insula. In other words, the brain feels absence as if it were an injury, an invisible but real cut. This discovery awakened in Liam something no previous data had generated: understanding. For the first time, he understood that what he felt wasn't weakness. It was chemistry, it was neurobiology in mourning. And this awakened in him not only empathy for himself, but also for Harper, Chloe, and all the app users who suffered in silence, trying to rationalize feelings that their bodies had already understood before their minds. Meanwhile, a secondary story was gaining traction on the platform. 2 users, Ava and Eli, had fallen deeply in love without ever meeting in person. For weeks, they exchanged only audio, text, and abstract images without video or calls. The curious thing? Their brain data, analyzed with consent, showed activity similar to that of couples in love in person. Harper, even from a distance, recorded an audio message sent to the team explaining, "When we want to believe, the brain fills in the gaps. The voice becomes a face. Absence becomes presence. Projection becomes love." Chloe, upon hearing the story, smiled tenderly. Behind the emotional competition, she knew they were all seeking the same thing, to feel seen. Liam, for his part, began to understand that logic without affection was stereotypical, and that longing, however painful, was also a sign that something had been true. And maybe, just maybe, he could still recapture it if he had the courage to stop planning his life and start feeling it. While the world was still recovering from Loverithm's dating bugs, another, more subtle but equally impactful phenomenon began to worry the team. With millions of new users joining daily, a disturbing pattern emerged. Most of them were failing to progress to lasting relationships. Chloe, always a data savvy, uncovered a report with disturbing statistics. Users with more than 20 active matches were 75% less likely to start a serious relationship. The reason? Paralysis from too much choice. The famous infinite menu syndrome. People spent hours swiping, chatting with multiple people at once, but committing to no one. Liam called this the age of almost. Harper, in a wry email, wrote, "It's like the brain is at an emotional buffet. It tries everything, but never actually sits down to eat." The excess of stimulation was destroying the emotional depth. It was the paradox of unlimited freedom. The more options, the less engagement. And this wasn't just behavior. It was neuroscience in meltdown. To try to resolve the impasse, Chloe proposed a radical new feature: Destiny Mode. When activated, the app limited options to a single profile at a time for a 7-day cycle. No endless swiping. No escaping. When doubt struck, the person would have to decide: interact, ignore, or risk missing out. The proposal divided the team. Some thought it was brilliant. Others thought it was emotional tyranny. But Destiny Mode was activated as a test on 1,000 profiles. And the results were surprising. Deep conversation rates increased, blocks decreased, and the number of matches converted into actual dates tripled. Interestingly, the most satisfied users weren't those who found their ideal partner, but those who, forced to choose, discovered nuances in profiles they would have previously dismissed with a swipe. The limitation had forced curiosity, and even more so, humility. In a world where everyone thinks they're too special to commit, Destiny Mode brought back the value of presence, attention, and emotional generosity. As part of the experiment, Chloe, in a bold act of self-mockery, forced Harper and Liam to activate Destiny Mode on their own profiles with each other. 7 days, no other options, no way out. At first, both treated the idea as a joke. But as the days passed, the exchange of messages deepened. Real questions. Childhood stories, fears, silences that didn't bother them. The kind of conversation the algorithm could never have predicted. Liam told about his grandmother who baked cookies while listening to jazz. Harper revealed that she hated parties, but loved people watching. It was as if, in the absence of distraction, affection found space to flourish. And so, unintentionally, the feature that was born to solve a technical problem became a catalyst for human connection. Chloe, observing everything from afar, smiled. Sometimes what's missing for love to happen isn't more choice, it's more presence. But what they didn't know was that the app's next test would put all of that to the test, including what each of them believed about themselves. Trevor, one of Loverithm's junior engineers, was known for his good humor, t-shirts with philosophical sayings, and a chronic tendency to fall in love with strangers. One morning, he walked into the office visibly distraught. He had fallen in love. With whom? With a woman who smiled at him for less than 5 seconds in a cafe. She ordered a cappuccino with almond milk and had a book of poetry in her hands. It was her. It had to be. The team, accustomed to Trevor's romantic reveries, laughed. But Harper, with her clinical eye and a hint of compassion disguised as skepticism, decided to use the case as a starting point for internal research. She explained that, faced with scarce stimuli, The human brain tends to fill in the blanks based on its own desires, a phenomenon in effective neuropsychology as idealized projection. In other words, Trevor wasn't in love with that woman. He was in love with the version his brain constructed based on a handful of clues. This insight opened a new frontier for debate at Loverithm. The team began studying reports from users who, even after brief interactions or just seeing profile photos, claimed to have found the love of their lives. By analyzing message data and engagement levels, they realized that many of these intense passions fizzled out on the first real date. The reason? The idealized person didn't live up to the fantasy. It was like trying to fit an emotional hologram into a flesh and blood body full of contradictions and insecurities. Chloe called the phenomenon the bad movie trailer effect. The preview is perfect, but the movie doesn't deliver. This realization led to changes to the app, like limiting conversation time before the first date and adding quizzes with disconcerting questions that forced users to reveal more of themselves. But the best results didn't come from the technology. They came from the laughter. The company began compiling the most absurd encounters into short videos, like unintentional sketches of emotional comedy. And with that, the app became not only a tool for connection, but also a mirror where each person could laugh at their own naivete with a little more empathy. Meanwhile, Liam and Harper, still under the influence of destiny mode, began revisiting their own patterns. In a late-night video chat, Harper confided that, as a teenager, she had fallen in love with a physics teacher who never knew she existed. Liam replied that he spent 4 years projecting love onto a girl who only saw him as the cool friend who fixes printers. They laughed together. But behind the lightheartedness lay an important recognition. Most of our most intense loves may never have been reciprocated, because they may not have even existed outside our own minds. This discovery, far from chilling their feelings, brought a new maturity to both of them. More compassion for themselves, more respect for each other's vulnerability, and a greater awareness that true love begins when we stop projecting and start seeing, even if what we see isn't perfect. And the company's next experiment would bring precisely this question to the fore. What sustains love when idealization finally ends? Among all the couples formed by Loverithm, there was one in particular that won over the public: Riley and Jamie. Young, charismatic, connected in every way, playlists, series, humor, even their favorite number was the same. They went viral as the algorithm's perfect couple, with cute videos, synchronized photos, and a compatibility rating of nearly 95%. For 2 years, they were living proof that the app worked. But then came the silence. First, they stopped posting. Then, they started showing up separately at events. When the support team sent out a discreet survey, the response was straightforward: "We're growing apart, but we still love each other." That intrigued Harper. She activated an internal analysis protocol and discovered that, in the most recent tests, their compatibility rating had dropped to 62%. The data showed a reduction in dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin levels between the two. The chemistry, literally, was fading. And this rekindled an old question, now with more weight: does love have an expiration date? Chloe, as always, dove into the data. She presented a study published in the Journal of Neuroscience that pointed out intense infatuation, biochemically speaking, lasts between 12 and 24 months. After that, the brain stops producing the same substances with the same frequency. It's as if the body decided to conserve emotional energy. Harper added, "It's natural. Infatuation is programmed to initiate bonding. But what keeps two people together after that is no longer chemistry, it's choice." This speech resonated with the team, especially Liam, who began to wonder if what he felt for Harper was the result of an initial neurochemical impulse or something deeper. He revisited their conversations, their silences, the silly irritations, the unexpected enchantments. And he realized that, even on the days when he didn't feel the butterflies, there was still something there, a desire to stay, a desire to understand. Respect, a kind of affection that doesn't pulse with adrenaline, but warms like tea on a cold day. Was this love? Or just what remains when the enchantment wears off? As the company lovingly followed Riley and Jamie's process now in couples therapy, without public pressure, the data gave way to stories. People began sharing how their relationships changed after the passion period. Couples learned to cook together, to care for plants, to laugh at small things. The algorithm, previously geared towards measuring intensity, began to be adapted to measure depth. New metrics were created: patience, commitment, honesty, kindness. Harper coined the term prolonged emotional compatibility. Chloe, always direct, said, "It's like an emotional health plan. Nobody finds it sexy, but it saves lives." Liam realized that love was less about feeling electrified all the time and more about being willing. Willing to grow, to make mistakes, to forgive. And maybe, just maybe, true love began when the chemistry ended. But would that be enough to face the next dilemma, the one that would put science and the heart on a collision course? On the eve of the launch of Loverithm's new update, a viral couple on the app caught the team's attention for an unusual reason. Tess and Noah, engaged couples, influencers, and public advocates for the app, had been invited to promote the new campaign called Trust the Science of Love. But behind the scenes, an advanced algorithm test revealed an unexpected finding. They both had a rare genetic incompatibility, which made it difficult to have children without high risks. The discovery fell like a bombshell within the company. Chloe, ever pragmatic, thought it best to hide the information until the couple could decide what to do. Harper, ethical to the core, objected. "If we build everything based on data, we have a responsibility to show the truth, even if it hurts." Liam was torn. He saw their love, genuine, visible in every gesture. But they also knew that by hiding this kind of data, they were jeopardizing the integrity of the project. It was the eternal dilemma: should we protect our hearts or obey reason? The impasse provoked an internal earthquake. Heated meetings, divisions within the team, ethical discussions that seemed to have come straight out of bioethics textbooks, but now took on faces, voices, and tears. Tess and Noah were called in to talk. Chloe suggested softening the news. Harper preferred to be direct. And with gentleness and empathy, she told the truth. The couple reacted with shock, of course. But the most surprising thing was what they said afterward. "We know what science says, but what we experience doesn't fit on a chart." Noah said that, even before they met. Tess said she didn't want to have biological children. Tess said that what united her and Noah wasn't genetics, it was partnership, empathy, the courage to laugh in the face of adversity. It was a moment of general commotion. Not because they denied science, but because they also chose to listen to their hearts. It was then that Liam realized the algorithm could predict chemistry, but it couldn't calculate the depth of a consciously chosen commitment. This situation led the team to rethink the limits of technology in the emotional realm. Chloe, with her analytical intelligence and sense of innovation, proposed something bold, adding a feature called free will to the app. Instead of automatically accepting matches based on the algorithm, users could choose to continue even when science indicated low compatibility. A sort of challenge mode for stubborn hearts. The idea was received enthusiastically. After all, love, ultimately, isn't just about following what makes sense. It's also about following what makes you feel. The update was successfully launched, and Tess and Noah, they married in an intimate, live-streamed ceremony with the phrase engraved on the altar, "Sometimes the heart needs to do what statistics don't approve." Their decision inspired thousands of users. And within the company, Liam and Harper, growing closer, began to realize that perhaps their incompatibilities were actually what connected them most. But the next obstacle would come from an even more delicate place: the invisible fear that sabotages relationships before they even begin. On the Loverithm forums, a new wave of complaints began to emerge. They were similar stories, promising matches, incredible conversations, obvious chemistry. Until, out of nowhere, one of the two disappeared, without warning, without closure. Ghosting, the digital silence that hurts more than many harsh words. Chloe, always committed to the user experience, suggested creating a rating system that would notify the behavior of the most disappearing profiles. Harper, on the other hand, wanted to delve deeper. She proposed a neurobehavioral study to understand what led emotionally invested people to vanish overnight. And the results were as surprising as they were revealing. Ghosting, in most cases, wasn't a lack of empathy, it was fear. Fear of future rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen completely. Disappearing was paradoxically an attempt at control, of closing before being closed, of running away from vulnerability. The brain, faced with the possibility of pain, activated survival mode. And silence became a strategy of emotional protection. This data deeply affected Liam. Seeing himself described in the reports, he felt the discomfort of the mirrored truth. He had done this with Harper several times. He walked away whenever he felt things were getting too real. He made excuses. He took refuge in work. He left messages unanswered. He said he needed time, but never explained why. When he talked to Harper about it, she didn't attack him. She simply said, "What you're running away from isn't me, it's feeling." The phrase echoed. For the first time, Liam understood that his escapes weren't about her, they were about him. About his insecurity disguised as independence. His immature emotional intelligence trying to protect a heart that hadn't yet learned to trust. This conversation became one of the most human moments in the story. No magic solutions. No promises. Just real vulnerability, where two adults recognize that love requires courage. And that trust is built through sincerity, not perfection. Inspired by this episode, the Loverithm team launched a new feature called End with Respect, a tool that helped users conclude interactions kindly and transparently, with personalized or recorded messages. The feature quickly became a trend and was praised by psychologists and therapists online. But more important than the feature itself was what it symbolized: the need to reclaim humanity in digital relationships. Harper wrote in a post, "Disappearing hurts. Telling the truth liberates. Even when it's as simple as 'I'm not ready.' That too is affection." Liam, after sharing his own story in an interview on the company's podcast, received hundreds of messages from users saying, "Thank you for normalizing vulnerability." And so, little by little, the app ceased to be just a matching tool and became a space for emotional reconciliation, where the courage to stay was more valuable than the rush to start. And it was this courage that would place Liam and Harper before the last and most beautiful contradiction of all. After months of intense work, exhaustive testing, and meticulous reprogramming, the Loverithm team finally achieved what seemed impossible: the final version of the algorithm. Now, it not only predicted the chance of two profiles falling in love, but also estimated the duration of the relationship based on genetic, emotional, cultural, and behavioral data. A revolution. The announcement caused a global uproar. The startup shares soared. Universities requested access to the source code. And for the first time, science seemed to have deciphered love. But there was one annoying detail: a statistical error, an anomalous case that the system couldn't explain. Liam and Harper. According to the algorithm, the two had a 42% compatibility rating, far too low to justify the bond they had developed. And even stranger, it was the only couple that, even after all the system updates, continued to appear as incongruent. Intrigued, Chloe investigated the databases. What she found was fascinating. The spikes in dopamine and oxytocin in both occurred during moments that weren't romantic, but intellectually intense. Debates, provocations, shared silences. They connected in ways the system couldn't measure. And it was then that Chloe wrote the phrase that would define the end of the algorithmic era. The deepest love isn't predictable. It's a flaw in the code, a beautiful bug in humanity. Inspired by this, the team decided to shut down the project. The app was deactivated with a final message: true love can't be calculated. It needs to be lived. Users around the world began sharing their stories, turning off the app like someone giving up a cane to learn to walk with their own heart. In the office, Chloe smiled as she watched the backlash, feeling like she had closed a circle. And then, without fanfare, Harper surprised everyone. She proposed to Liam with a simple, direct question: do you want to be my favorite statistical error for the rest of your life? The answer didn't require an algorithm or words, just a nervous smile, a yes muffled by a kiss, and the certainty that in the end, that's what love is: a courageous improbability, an imperfect code that insists on working. And as the credits of this story roll before the audience's eyes, a final sentence appears on the screen: love is the only bug we don't want to fix. In a world where almost everything can be calculated, predicted, and programmed, love remains the only equation with an infinite variable. Loverithm may have attempted to map emotions, draw profiles, and predict outcomes, but it failed in the face of what is most essential, the human mystery. Because love doesn't only happen when everything goes right. It happens in mistakes, in improvisation, in the exchange of glances that shouldn't happen but do. It reveals itself in shared silences, in accepted flaws, in flaws that fit together. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson of this story. What truly connects us isn't perfect compatibility, it's the imperfect willingness to stay even when everything tells us to leave. Don't get caught up in superficial affinities. The best connections sometimes arise where we least expect them. The brain may not approve, but the heart recognizes. Embrace the paradox. Love is chemistry, but it's also a choice. Dopamine may ignite desire, but it's daily decisions that sustain the bond. Question your projections. Are you loving the person or the idea you've created about them? Love is seeing clearly and still choosing to stay. Don't shy away from discomfort. True passion often arises from friction, from difference, from the provocation that expands our emotional limits. Stop searching for the perfect match and start cultivating the true bond. No one is compatible all the time, but those who choose to grow together become one. Now, a question for you to reflect on and comment on. Would you trust your love life to an algorithm, or do you still believe in the magic of imperfect encounters? Leave your answer in the comments, and if this story made you laugh, think, or feel like, share and subscribe to the channel. Because here, we talk about love as it is. Chaotic, inexplicable, but absolutely real. Love is humanity's most beautiful bug. And perhaps the only one who deserves to stay in the system forever.